This is a Mokapot shaped like a bird. It's called the Crowkapot. And if you like coffee, and you like birds, and you don't immediately love this coffee maker, I don't think I know how to help you, but let me tell you what I find so refreshing about this coffee maker. I see new coffee brewers like all the time, and very often when they launch, they try to capitalize on really what is a very minimal differentiation in terms of how they function compared to all the other previous ones that have been released. And then they really hype that up with all this kind of marketing language and dramatic videos and stuff. And then as a coffee reviewer, I need to sort of dig in and see how big of a difference those claims actually make. And very often they're not quite as dramatic as manufacturers would have you believe. Adrian Campbell, the inventor of this, takes a bit of a different approach. One day he was looking at his Mokapot and he thought, it looks kind of drab, it looks kind of boring. I think maybe that thing would be better if it was shaped like a bird. And then he thought, I think I'm gonna make one of those shaped like a bird. That would make a great pun. And now we have this, a Mokapot shaped like a bird, specifically shaped like a crow, the Crowkapot, which aside from being shaped like a crow, makes absolutely zero claims about being better in any way than other Mokapots. So right off the bat, it's cheeky, it's fun, it's honest, and I just love that. So I saw the project, I reached out to Adrian, we got to chatting about this thing, and he offered to send me one to test out, to which of course I said yes. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the Crowkapot, and I'm also going to give you some Mokapot tips. Before we get into that though, a couple things about Mokapots. How they work is pretty interesting. They separate into two pieces, basically. This chamber down here, which is what you put the water into the very bottom here, and then you put coffee into this basket right here. And then you have this upper section right here, which is what the coffee flows up to and brews into in here. Now in this one, in the Crowkapot, you can take the components out. You can see there's a gasket right here, the screen filter out. You can take the spout out that kind of fits inside the crow. And when you have all these things kind of back together, the way that these types of brewers brew is pretty ingenious. You see, you put your Mokapot full of coffee and water on a stove, and then it will start to heat up on the bottom here. And as it heats up, it'll create steam in the top of this chamber right here. And the pressure of that steam actually pushes the water down and up through that nozzle and into the bottom of the coffee bed. And because of that steam pressure, it'll keep forcing that water up, which becomes brewed coffee, up through the spout and into the top of the Mokapot, or Crowkapot. Now, some people call the type of coffee that these coffee makers make espresso. This is not what most coffee geeks would call espresso. It's definitely more concentrated than filter coffee, but is not a true 9-bar espresso. I actually have reviewed on this channel a coffee maker called the 9 Barista, which takes a very similar approach and uses it to make true 9-bar espresso. You can check that video out if you want. But a couple things to note before we dig in and make a coffee with this thing. Mokapots are very European, a little old school, maybe even, and in my opinion, very actually underrated by the standards of most coffee geeks, who generally tend to lean to either espresso or pour over. You see, when I first got into coffee a couple decades ago now, I got a Mokapot from a thrift store and I started messing around with it, and I had expectedly pretty terrible results. You know, I tried it, and after those first couple brews, I just assumed that this was an old school way of making coffee that produced actually pretty bad, pretty bitter coffee. Some of that was the coffee I was using at the time. Some of that was I didn't really know what I was doing. But years and years later, when I returned to the Mokapot, and I actually did a little bit of research and I learned how to brew with them properly, you can make some excellent coffee with these things, even with very lightly roasted coffees. And I'm going to give you some tips on how to do just that. But I do want to give a shout out to two channels in particular. One is called The Wired Gourmet, and I learned a lot about optimizing Mokapots from The Wired Gourmet. You should definitely check out his channel. I will link to 2 videos around the Mokapot that he produced that in particular are just really, really good. There's a lot of good content there, definitely worth subscribing. But those two videos, if you really want to tweak your Mokapot, are excellent. Also, James HOFFMAN did a fantastic video on the Mokapot in general, which also is a great video. I will also say that wherever you can find somebody saying this is the right way to use a Mokapot, you can almost always find another, usually very opinionated person who is saying that is totally wrong, that is not how you use a Mokapot, this is how you use it. So I'm going to give you some tips, but I'll just say that if you like what you do, if you like the coffee that you're getting out of it and you're enjoying it, valid. Here's what works for me. You know, you can eyeball this, you know, just basically fill it up with water up to the little pressure relief valve right here, fill the basket up with coffee, you do a couple other little things right, and it's likely that you're going to end up with a good cup. Now, if you want to go beyond eyeballing this, most Mokapots will use roughly a 1:10 ratio. That means for however much coffee you're going to use, you want to put in about 10 times the amount of water in the reservoir down here. I find with the Crowkapot, the basket will take about 20 to 25 grams worth of coffee, and the reservoir, if you fill it up to just underneath the bottom of the pressure relief valve right here, it will take just under 250 mils of water. So in and about that 1:10 ratio. Now, the first tip I got from some of those other videos was to fill the base of the Mokapot with water that is just off boil. Some people like to boil the water in the base, which arguably is even better. I find it's a little bit harder to handle, even if you're using a towel to kind of screw it together afterwards. And what you're trying to do with that is you're trying to minimize the amount of time that the Mokapot is sitting on the stove heating up. Because if it's sitting on there for a really long time, getting really, really hot, trying to heat up the water and the whole system, the temperatures are really going to climb and you're a lot more likely to get too bitter of a cup of coffee. Now, as far as grind size goes, you want to be coarser than espresso for sure, but definitely finer than even like a 1 cup pour over. And you do want to make sure that the grounds are very evenly distributed in the coffee bed. If you have a WDT tool for espresso, you can do that. If you don't, you can just kind of give it a little shake or shimmy to kind of even out those grounds as much as possible. Next tip, which is super helpful, is if you get an AeroPress filter, which is really a cheap filter, more or less, and you put it over this steel filter that is in the Mokapot or the Crowkapot, and you just wet it just a little to help it stick in place. That will really minimize any grounds or sediment that can move up through the Mokapot or Crowkapot while it's brewing and get into your final cup. So I'm just going to do that, and then I'm going to take these two things and I'm going to screw them together. If your base is too hot to handle, which very likely it will be, you can use a towel. Then what we're going to do is we're going to get our Crowkapot and we're going to sit it on the stove. Now, I've been preheating my stove, so the element is already hot. I don't need to leave it on there waiting for the element to heat up. This is my real house. Sometimes I get asked if this is a studio. This is not that big of an operation, so we're just going to park it on there right now. Now, when I put it on the stove, I don't want to put it on like max heat. I want to give it like a very moderate heat. And if you've done everything with the boiling water, you've maybe even boiled the water inside the Mokapot, you're going to hear it start to do something very quickly, almost right away. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it on that moderate heat until I start to see coffee bubbling out of the spot. I'm going to leave the top of the Crowkapot open and I'm just going to watch it to see when I start getting coffee flow. And once you start to get a little bit of flow, you'll start to see some steam coming out the top here. And you don't want to let it flow too quickly. You want it to maintain a slow, even flow. And if you have an electric stove like this, you can just take it on and off of heat manually to try and control that. If you have a faster reacting heat source like a gas stove or an induction stove, you can try and surf your temperature manually, but you want to maintain a very slow, even flow by watching the spout. If you want that super thick, almost espresso-like consistency, what you want to do is you want to aim for a longer extraction, somewhere like 2.5 to 3.5 minutes. And then once it starts to gurgle, if you hear any gurgling sound, you want to pull it off right away off the heat and then run underwater. And then basically as soon as possible, you want to pour your coffee into something else. And that will prevent it from getting that burned, bitter flavor from sitting in the hot Crowkapot. And if all goes well, you should be left with a very tasty, very concentrated cup of coffee. This is a Guatemalan from Corvus Coffee. I would call this like a medium roast. Very good cup of coffee. Now, if that concentrate is actually too intense for you, too strong, you can water it down into like a Mokapot Americano. Some people like doing that. I find it's quite enjoyable like this too, though. Now, again, if you want to go further than that, really dial in your Mokapot brew the way that you want, I would highly recommend you watch those other videos. They'll be in the description. But I will say, on the whole, Mokapot's very underrated, and the Crowkapot in particular, very fun brewer. And basically, that's the Crowkapot. Nothing otherwise really unique or innovative about how it works, aside from being shaped like a crow. Adrian is based in North Carolina. Most of the Crowkapot is cast out of 304 stainless, with some of the hardware being 430 stainless. The handle is ABS plastic. The components are produced in China, and Adrian does all of the final assembly and goes over each and every one of these things personally to make sure that it's just exactly the way that he wants. And that's kind of it. No made up marketing nonsense, no grandiose, groundbreaking features that don't actually make that bunch of a difference. Just a very fun, a very honest, a very cheeky and playful coffee maker that makes a great cup of coffee. And it's shaped like a crow. Crowkapot. I love it. But I want to hear what you think. Are you a Mokapot drinker and just out there thinking that I'm totally off my rocker when it comes to these things? Do you love this Crowkapot, or do you think it's ridiculous? Whatever you think, I want to hear from you in the comments. I hope your next cup of coffee is fantastic, and we'll see you next time.